I woke up to the sound of birds outside the window and the faint warmth of sunlight falling across my face. For a moment, everything felt ordinary. The sheets smelled like the lavender detergent my wife always used, the mattress dipped in the way it always had, and there was a calmness in the air that reminded me of safety. I turned slightly, expecting the comfort of her presence beside me, the familiar rhythm of her breathing, and the reassurance of routine. My eyes stayed closed longer than usual, because mornings like this were rare, moments where the world seemed kind, where I could breathe without rushing, where love felt steady. But in that stillness, my heart stirred with something else. It wasn't peace. It wasn't joy. It was something I couldn't name. The sensation was quiet but sharp, like a whisper pressing against the edges of my mind. Something was off, though I didn't want to admit it. I tried to ignore it at first. I pulled the blanket closer, convinced myself it was just tiredness or maybe the remnants of a dream. I told myself this was home, that she was right there beside me, that life was as it had always been. Yet, when I shifted, when I breathed in deeper, a new scent lingered in the air. Not lavender. Not her perfume. It was faint, but it carried a weight that made my chest tighten. My eyes opened, and for a second I wished they hadn't. The room looked the same, curtains drawn halfway, the clock on the bedside table blinking the wrong time as usual, the scattered books she never finished reading. But familiarity couldn't erase the strange heaviness in my stomach. I turned again, slower this time, and looked at the shape lying beside me. She was there. At least, I thought she was. Her hair spilled across the pillow like always, her hand rested loosely near mine, her breathing steady. Anyone else would have believed this was the picture of love. But why did I feel like I was staring at a stranger? My throat tightened, and I closed my eyes quickly, almost ashamed of the thought. I told myself, this is your wife, the woman you promised forever to, the person who has stood beside you through storms. Don't think like that. Don't feel like that. But the harder I tried to silence my mind, the louder it became. The smallest details began to stand out, the way her hand felt heavier, the curve of her body not quite matching memory, the faint difference in her breathing rhythm. I wanted to believe it was all in my head. I wanted to believe nothing had changed. Yet a quiet panic began to rise inside me, unshakable and raw. I laid there frozen, afraid to move closer, afraid to pull away. My body felt both connected and detached, like I belonged in that bed but didn't at the same time. I thought of last night, trying to piece together blurred fragments. The laughter over dinner, the soft music playing in the background, the glass of wine I drank too quickly. Then warmth, closeness, her touch, but the memory was hazy, like it belonged to someone else's life. I remembered love, or at least what should have been love. But what if it wasn't? What if I wasn't as certain as I thought? I squeezed my eyes shut again, but that only brought more questions. Why did my chest ache with guilt before I even knew the truth? Why did I feel like I had crossed a line I didn't understand? My hand brushed against hers, and instead of comfort, a jolt of unease ran through me. It was almost unbearable. I pulled away quickly, pretending it was accidental. My mind raced, faster than I could control, spinning with thoughts I had never let myself face before. What if everything I knew about my marriage, about myself, was about to change? What if the life I believed was safe and real was nothing more than a shadow of what I truly wanted? I turned once more, staring at the ceiling, listening to her slow breathing. My heart pounded against my chest, demanding answers I wasn't ready to hear. The world outside carried on as if nothing was wrong, but in that room, in that silence, my soul whispered the truth. Something about this morning wasn't right. Something about last night wasn't real. And deep down, I already knew, this wasn't the life I thought it was. The following morning carried a heaviness that clung to me before I even opened my eyes. The air felt thick, heavy with a silence that pressed down on me in ways I couldn't explain. I lay still for a while, staring at the ceiling, pretending to be calm while my mind twisted itself into knots. I didn't want to look beside me. I didn't want to see her face, not because I didn't love her, but because I was afraid of what I would feel, or not feel, if I did. Eventually, I forced myself to turn, and there she was, lying with her back toward me, strands of hair tangled across the pillow. It should have comforted me. It should have been familiar. But instead, my chest ached with a strange unease, as though the very shape of her beside me had become unfamiliar. I got out of bed quietly, moving through the motions of the morning in a haze. Brushing my teeth, washing my face, pouring coffee, each task was done by habit, but my mind wasn't there. It was somewhere else, circling the same questions over and over again. Why couldn't I remember last night clearly? Why did I feel as though I had been somewhere else, with someone else? The taste of doubt was bitter on my tongue, no matter how much coffee I sipped to chase it away. As the hours passed, I found myself drawn to small details, noticing things I never cared about before. Her phone, left carelessly on the couch. The faint smell of cologne that didn't belong to either of us clinging to a shirt tossed in the laundry basket. The way she hummed absent-mindedly while making breakfast, but the tune wasn't one I had ever heard her sing before. It was like living in the same house but seeing it for the first time, realizing the walls weren't as steady as I once thought. I told myself not to look at her phone. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was betraying the trust we had built. But temptation gnawed at me until I couldn't resist. When she went upstairs to take a shower, I sat on the couch and picked it up, my hands trembling as though it weighed 100 pounds. My breath came shallow as I swiped the screen open. My heart beat so loudly I thought it might burst through my chest. Messages filled the screen, most of them harmless at first, family, friends, co-workers. But then I saw a name I didn't recognize. Just a single name, saved without a last name, simple and unassuming. My thumb hovered over it, debating whether to open it. A wave of guilt washed over me, but curiosity, no, fear, was stronger. I tapped it. The screen lit up with words that knocked the air out of me. Short messages, fragments of conversations, but enough to make my pulse race. Last night was unforgettable. I can't stop thinking about you. When will we see each other again? My hand tightened around the phone until my knuckles turned white. My throat closed, dry and raw, as I scrolled further. There were details, small, intimate things, that didn't belong to strangers. Words filled with tenderness, with desire. Words I hadn't heard from her in so long. My stomach dropped as the truth began to take shape, and yet, even then, part of me resisted. I wanted to believe it was a misunderstanding, that there was an explanation. But then I saw something I couldn't deny, a voice note. My finger hesitated before pressing it, but once I did, the sound that filled the room froze me where I sat. It wasn't her voice. The voice that whispered softly through the speaker didn't belong to my wife. It was deeper, lower, filled with a warmth that didn't belong to her at all. My heart pounded in my ears as I listened again, holding the phone closer, desperate and terrified all at once. "I wish I could hold you again," the voice said, quiet and intimate, as if meant to be heard only by her. My breath caught, and the room spun. I dropped the phone onto the couch, my hands shaking violently. I stumbled backward, gripping the edge of the table to steady myself, my chest rising and falling too quickly. The sound of the shower upstairs continued, unaware, steady, ordinary. But my world had just split in two. The truth I had avoided, the whispers in my chest, the unease I had felt, it all came crashing down in that moment. She wasn't the person I thought she was. The marriage I thought I had wasn't what I believed. And worse, the voice that echoed in my ears stirred something inside me I wasn't prepared to face. It wasn't just jealousy I felt. It wasn't just betrayal. There was something else, something deeper, something I didn't want to admit. That voice made my heart ache in a way I couldn't explain. I sank onto the couch, burying my face in my hands, and for the first time, I allowed myself to wonder if the life I was living wasn't just built on her secrets, but on mine too. The rest of the day blurred, though every second of it weighed heavily on my chest. I couldn't focus on anything except the sound of that voice in my head, playing over and over like a haunting melody I couldn't silence. It wasn't her voice, but it wasn't just about her. It was about me too, about the way that voice stirred something in me I didn't want to admit. I paced the living room, restless, my palms sweating, my heart slamming against my ribs like it was trying to escape. When she finally came downstairs after her shower, dressed in her usual soft clothes, hair damp and dripping over her shoulders, she smiled at me as though nothing was wrong. That smile, once a comfort, now felt like a mask, and it made my stomach turn. She sat across from me at the table, flipping through her phone casually, completely unaware that I had already looked inside her world. My throat tightened as I studied her, searching for answers in the tilt of her head, in the way her fingers tapped the screen, in the way she avoided my eyes when I looked at her for too long. Every small detail screamed of secrets, and I couldn't pretend anymore. I tried to keep calm, tried to swallow down the storm inside me, but silence became unbearable. My voice cracked when I finally spoke. "Who is he?" She froze. Her fingers stopped moving, her shoulders tensed, and she lifted her eyes to mine slowly, carefully, as though weighing her words. For a long moment, she didn't say anything. The silence between us stretched, heavy and suffocating, until it felt like the air itself was pressing against my chest. I repeated the question, this time firmer, my voice trembling despite my attempt to sound steady. "Who is he?" Her lips parted, but no words came at first. Then finally, she whispered, "I didn't want you to find out like this." The words sliced through me, sharp and merciless. I had braced myself for denial, for lies, for excuses. But I hadn't expected honesty so blunt, so raw. My stomach knotted as I leaned back in my chair, gripping the edge to stop myself from shaking. "So it's true," I muttered, the weight of it pressing down on me harder than I imagined. She lowered her gaze, unable to meet my eyes, and for the first time in years, I saw fear on her face, not fear of me, but fear of what the truth might do to us. I asked again, this time softer, almost pleading, "Who is he?" Her voice broke when she answered. She didn't give me a name at first, just a confession that spilled out like a flood. She spoke of loneliness, of feeling unseen, of searching for something she couldn't find in me anymore. Tears welled in her eyes as she admitted she hadn't meant for it to happen, that it started as a friendship, innocent and harmless, but grew into something neither of them could ignore. I sat there frozen, every word striking me like a blow. My heart ached with betrayal, but beneath it, there was another feeling I couldn't explain, one I was afraid to face. Because as she spoke, I realized it wasn't just her secret that had been unearthed. It was mine too. I thought of the voice again, that deep, warm voice on the recording, the way it lingered in my chest long after I heard it. I should have felt nothing but rage, but instead, I felt drawn to it, as though it had awakened something inside me that had been buried for years. I wanted to deny it, to push it away, but the truth burned too brightly to ignore. I wasn't just angry at her. I was angry at myself, for the way I was reacting, for the way that voice didn't just make me jealous but made me long for something I couldn't name. I pressed my hands against my face, tears stinging my eyes, unable to hide the pain any longer. "Why didn't you just tell me?" I asked, my voice muffled, trembling. She looked at me then, her eyes red and wet, and whispered, "Because I knew it would break you. And because I wasn't ready to admit what it meant for me either." The words sank deep, leaving us both exposed in ways we couldn't take back. I felt the foundation of our marriage crumbling beneath us, every memory, every promise, every moment together shifting into something fragile and uncertain. Yet, even in that devastation, a strange sense of clarity flickered in me. The truth was out now, raw and unfiltered, and it left no place to hide, not for her, and not for me. I sat in silence for a long time, staring at the woman I thought I knew, realizing that in uncovering her secret, I had uncovered something about myself too. And that frightened me more than anything she had confessed. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay in the dark with my eyes open, staring at the ceiling as if it held answers I was too afraid to ask. She was next to me, her back turned, her breathing steady, but there was no comfort in that sound anymore. The bed felt like a battlefield between us, with silence louder than any argument could ever be. My chest was tight, my mind was restless, and every time I closed my eyes, I heard that voice again, the one from the recording. It echoed in my memory, low and tender, carrying warmth that twisted something deep inside me. I hated myself for it. I hated that I wasn't only hurt by her betrayal, but shaken by my own reaction. It should have been simple, anger, heartbreak, resentment. But it wasn't. Instead, I felt exposed in ways I never had before, as though her secret had cracked me open too. I tried to convince myself that what I felt was nothing more than shock, that I was confusing my emotions, but the more I denied it, the stronger it became. Lying there, I replayed pieces of my life, trying to find moments I had buried, signs I had ignored. Memories came rushing back, of friendships that felt too close, of glances I held too long when no one was watching, of thoughts I always pushed away with shame and silence. I remembered being young and wondering why my heart beat differently when certain people were near, but I buried it under the weight of expectation, under the life I thought I was supposed to live. I told myself I was just confused, that marriage would fix it, that love with her would silence the questions. And for years, I believed it had. Until now. Now, sitting in this darkness, the truth clawed its way to the surface, raw and undeniable. I wasn't just angry at her for loving someone else. I was angry at myself for realizing I longed for something I had never let myself want. Tears burned my eyes, but I didn't wipe them away. I let them fall, silent against the pillow, because for the first time, I understood what my heart had been trying to tell me all along. I wasn't just broken by her betrayal. I was broken by the lie I had been living. My hands trembled as I pressed them against my face, trying to hold myself together. The thought scared me more than anything I had ever faced. What would it mean for me, for my marriage, for my life, if I admitted the truth? What would it mean if I said out loud the thing I had never dared to say, even in my own mind? I was a man who had built a life on promises, who had vowed forever to a woman I thought I loved the way I was supposed to. But deep inside, something else was there, something I could no longer deny. I was drawn to men. I was drawn to him, whoever he was, the man behind that voice. The realization shattered me. I wanted to scream, to break something, to run away from myself. But instead, I lay there, silent and shaking, knowing there was no way back. Once the truth had been seen, it couldn't be unseen. And as painful as it was, a small part of me felt relief, like taking the first breath after holding it for too long. Still, the relief was drowned in fear. How could I face her, knowing that her betrayal had forced me to face my own? How could I look at myself in the mirror, knowing I had been living in denial for so long? My heart ached with guilt, not just for her, but for me, for the years I had wasted pretending to be someone I wasn't. The night stretched endlessly, and by the time the first light of dawn crept through the curtains, I felt like a different person, broken, raw, but awake in a way I had never been before. I turned my head and looked at her sleeping peacefully beside me, and for the first time, I didn't recognize the person lying next to me. Not because she had changed, but because I finally saw myself clearly, and I knew nothing would ever be the same again. The morning light poured through the curtains, soft and golden, but it felt harsh against my tired eyes. I hadn't slept at all. My mind had been unraveling itself through the night, pulling apart every lie, every buried truth, every quiet moment of doubt that I had ignored for years. By the time she stirred beside me, stretching and rubbing her eyes, I already knew the words I needed to say, even though my voice shook at the thought of speaking them. She looked at me and gave a small smile, the kind that used to mean safety, but now it only deepened the ache inside me. I sat up, my hands twisting nervously in my lap, and for a long moment I couldn't speak. My throat felt dry, my chest heavy, but the silence between us was unbearable. "We need to talk," I finally whispered. She froze, the smile slipping from her face. She sat up too, pulling the blanket tighter around herself, as if she knew where this was going but wasn't ready to hear it. My heart pounded as I tried to find the right words. I told her I had seen the messages, that I had heard the voice, and that I knew. She didn't argue. She didn't deny it. She simply lowered her eyes, her shoulders trembling, and whispered, "I'm sorry." The sound of her apology broke something inside me, but not for the reason she thought. I wasn't just grieving her betrayal anymore. I was grieving the truth I had hidden from myself for so long. I swallowed hard, the words burning on my tongue, and finally said what I had been too afraid to admit. It's not just you. It's me too. I think I've been lying to myself for a long time. She looked at me then, her eyes wide and full of confusion, and I knew she understood what I meant before I could even finish. My voice cracked as I explained how the voice I heard didn't just hurt me, it awakened something I had buried deep, something I had tried to deny. I told her about the feelings I had pushed away for years, the moments of attraction I had ignored, the truth I had never dared to face. The words came out in broken pieces, raw and trembling, but once they left my mouth, I felt both terrified and free. She covered her mouth with her hand, tears welling in her eyes. Not tears of anger, not even betrayal anymore, but something else, grief, maybe, or relief. We sat in silence, the weight of my confession filling the room until it was hard to breathe. I expected her to scream, to curse, to throw me out. But instead, she reached for my hand, her fingers trembling against mine, and whispered, "I think I always knew." That sentence cut me deeper than anything else. She said she had seen it in me, in the way I sometimes looked away too quickly, in the way I avoided certain conversations, in the way I seemed restless even when everything appeared fine. She said she didn't want to believe it, because believing it meant our whole marriage was built on something fragile. I couldn't stop the tears that finally spilled over, and for the first time in years, I let them fall without shame. I admitted that I had loved her, that a part of me would always love her, but it wasn't the love she deserved. It wasn't the love that could last a lifetime. And she cried too, not just for herself, but for me, for the years I had wasted hiding from myself, for the fear that had kept me silent, for the truth that had come crashing down between us now. We held each other in that moment, not as husband and wife, not as lovers, but as two people mourning the life they had built and the lies they had lived. It was painful, raw, and devastating, but it was also honest in a way we had never been before. For the first time, I felt seen, not for who I pretended to be, but for who I truly was. And though it terrified me, it also lit a small spark of hope inside me. Because in that fragile honesty, I realized that maybe the end of our marriage wasn't just an ending. Maybe it was also a beginning, not just for her, but for me. A beginning where I could finally step into the truth I had hidden from for so long, and maybe, just maybe, find the love I had been searching for all along. The days that followed felt like walking through fire and water at the same time. Everything I had believed about myself was gone, and yet there was a strange calm beneath the chaos. I no longer had to fight with the voice inside me that told me I was living a lie. The truth was out, exposed and raw, and even though it terrified me, there was a freedom in knowing I no longer had to pretend. Still, the reality of it all pressed down on me. She moved around the house with quiet footsteps, avoiding long conversations, her eyes often red from tears she tried to hide. We spoke only when necessary, about practical things, about meals, about schedules. But underneath every word was a heavy silence, a grief that belonged to both of us. I found myself spending more time alone, walking through the neighborhood late at night, staring at the stars, trying to figure out what life looked like now. I replayed memories in my head, moments when I thought I had been happy, moments that seemed pure. Yet when I looked closer, I saw the cracks, the places where I had forced myself to fit into a role that wasn't mine. Marriage had given me comfort, but not wholeness. Love had given me companionship, but not truth. Now that the mask was gone, I felt both naked and alive. One night, I sat at the edge of the bed while she slept, watching her from a distance. She looked peaceful in that moment, but I knew peace would be temporary. We couldn't keep living like this, pretending we could repair what was broken. And I realized then that honesty had to guide us forward, even if it meant letting go. The next morning, over coffee, I told her we couldn't keep holding on to something that no longer existed. My voice trembled as I admitted that I couldn't go back, that I couldn't unlearn what I now knew about myself. Her hands shook as she held her cup, but she didn't argue. Instead, she nodded slowly, her eyes shining with tears. She whispered that she didn't hate me, that she could never hate me, but that she needed to find herself again too. The pain in her words was sharp, but it carried a strange kind of love. It wasn't the love of a wife anymore. It was the love of someone who had shared years, dreams, and secrets with me, and who still wanted me to be whole, even if she couldn't be the one beside me anymore. The weeks that followed were filled with small steps. We began the process of separating our lives, not with anger but with quiet sorrow. I helped her pack some of her things, she helped me reorganize the house, and though every action cut deep, there was tenderness in it too. We weren't enemies. We were simply two people finally telling the truth. In the stillness of those days, I started to feel myself more than I ever had before. I no longer looked in the mirror and saw a stranger pretending. I saw a man who had been broken open but was finally breathing honestly. I didn't know what the future held, and that uncertainty was terrifying. But it also carried possibility. For the first time, I allowed myself to imagine what it would be like to live without hiding, to love without shame. And though I didn't know where that path would take me, I knew it was the only path worth walking now. As she stood in the doorway one evening, suitcase in hand, we looked at each other for a long time. No words could cover the weight of that moment. I stepped forward, hugged her tightly, and whispered thank you, not for the betrayal, not for the pain, but for being part of my story, for helping me face the truth even when it hurt. She whispered thank you back, and then she was gone, leaving behind an echo of memories and the quiet of a house that suddenly felt too big. But instead of collapsing under the emptiness, I stood there in the silence, breathing in deeply. The air felt different now. It felt real. For the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of who I was anymore. I didn't have all the answers, and I didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But I knew this, I had finally stepped into the truth of myself, and even in the ruins of what I lost, there was hope in what I might find. The house felt impossibly quiet after she left, as though every corner carried the echo of her presence and the weight of our years together. At first, the silence was unbearable. I found myself moving through the rooms as if expecting her to appear, her laugh spilling out from the kitchen, her voice calling my name from upstairs. But each time, I was met with nothing but stillness. That stillness cut deep, but it also forced me to sit with myself in a way I never had before. There was no one left to hide behind, no mask to wear, no lie to carry. It was just me, stripped bare, and that was both terrifying and liberating. In the weeks that followed, I began to rebuild, not the life I had lost, but the one I had denied myself for so long. I started small, with things that might seem insignificant to others but meant everything to me. I sat with my own thoughts without running from them. I wrote in journals, pouring out the feelings I had silenced for decades. I went on long walks where I let myself think about what it truly meant to be honest with who I was. Sometimes I cried until my chest hurt, grieving the years I had wasted. Other times, I felt a strange, quiet joy rise in me, like sunlight breaking through after a storm. For the first time, I was allowing myself to imagine a different kind of love, a different kind of future, one that didn't follow the script I had been handed by family, by society, by my own fear. The thought of loving a man no longer felt like something shameful buried in the shadows of my mind. It felt like a possibility waiting to be embraced, though I didn't know when or how. One evening, I found myself sitting in the living room with her old suitcase still by the door, forgotten in her rush to leave. I opened it to check what she had left behind, and inside I found a photograph of us from our wedding day. I stared at it for a long time, remembering the vows we made, the smiles we shared, the hope in our eyes. My throat tightened as I realized those smiles weren't lies, they were real, but they belonged to people who didn't yet know their truths. I slipped the photo back inside and closed the suitcase, whispering a quiet goodbye not just to her but to the man I had been. That man had tried to do everything right. That man had wanted to fit into the mold, to follow the path expected of him. But he had also carried a secret so heavy it almost destroyed him. Now, I was learning to live as someone new, someone lighter, someone honest. The journey wasn't easy. There were nights I questioned if I was strong enough to walk this path, if I deserved happiness after all the years of pretending. There were days I felt overwhelmed by loneliness, afraid that no one would ever truly accept me. But each time those fears rose, I reminded myself of the moment I first admitted the truth to her, of the way my chest felt lighter even through the tears. That was the moment I knew I could never go back. Slowly, I began to connect with people I had kept at a distance before. I joined spaces where men like me shared their stories, their struggles, their triumphs. Listening to them felt like looking into a mirror I had avoided all my life. Their words gave me courage, their journeys gave me hope. For the first time, I didn't feel alone in what I was going through. I realized that what I had thought was shame was actually just silence, and breaking that silence gave me power. And then, one day, unexpectedly, I met someone. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't even romantic at first. It was a conversation, a simple exchange of words, but something in his eyes felt familiar, something in his presence felt safe. We talked about ordinary things, books, music, the places we loved, but underneath it all was a current I couldn't ignore. My heart beat in a rhythm it hadn't in years, not forced, not hidden, but free. I didn't fall in love immediately, but I felt the possibility of it, and that possibility alone was enough to make me believe in tomorrow again. Standing at the threshold of this new life, I thought about the man I used to be, the husband, the pretender, the one who thought silence was safer than truth. I thought about the nights I lay awake wishing I could be someone else, someone braver. And I realized I had become that man, not by choice but by breaking, by losing, by finally being forced to face myself. The scandal that shattered my marriage, the betrayal that nearly destroyed me, it had also set me free. And as painful as it was, I couldn't hate it anymore. Because it gave me the chance to live. I don't know what the rest of my life will look like. I don't know if love will come again in the way I hope. But I do know this: I will never again apologize for who I am. I will never again bury my truth beneath someone else's expectations. I will live, fully and honestly, even if it means walking a path I once feared. And maybe, just maybe, that path will lead me to the kind of love I was always meant to find, the kind that feels like home not because it looks right to the world, but because it feels right in my soul.